cause that be natural.
Lady
I ain't
D.
looking tacky. I keep my game tactful.
Yo.
Yeah, I'm so nappy.
M.O.B.
Cause that be natural.
The infamous.
I ain't looking tacky cause I keep my game tactful.
I'm so pretty, I'm so fat, boo. I'm so natural, it's like it's a taboo. I'm so filthy, got the tattoos stuck in these bitches like I own ragu. On my business with my platoon, getting these minutes like I'm a typhoon. Y'all this jersey on that cartoon and I'm still on top.
Hey guys, and welcome back to Afros and Baby Hairs, and thank you for joining me once again in the reading room for book review number 21 on Murderville 3, The Black Dahlia by Ashley and Jaquavis. If you're interested in hearing details on this book as well as my thoughts and opinions, then please stay tuned. I am not and do not promote this book to anyone who is under the age of 18. If you are under the age of 18, please get your parents' consent and or supervision before reading this book. Now that I've gotten that out of the way, let's get into this book review. So I'm going to start off by reading the back of the book. And the back of the book reads, "This thrilling page turner introduces the story of the Black Dahlia and her blood-stained ascent to power. After establishing a connection with the 5 families, Dahlia becomes literally untouchable. Her brazen tactics and mafia-style antics become infamous as she is set to take on the country's black market. But there is only one thing standing in her way. She is a woman. The competition doesn't respect her, so Dahlia sets out on a bloody mission to ensure the protection of her new kingdom. Liberty has relocated to her hometown only to get a knock on the door by a man she hasn't seen in years. She reacquaints herself with the past and gets connected with some of the biggest bosses in the country. When fate brings her face to face with Dahlia, who will end up victorious? Will Dahlia's newfound power make her invincible? Or will Liberty get the revenge she deserves? What happens next is the most shocking ending that Ashley and Jaquavis have ever created. This is storytelling at its greatest." Alright, so next I would like to tell you guys about the new characters in this book. Some of the characters I'm going to leave off because they didn't play a really big role in this particular book. So we have Salim. This is Zulu's assistant. He's been his assistant for over 20 years. You have Ali Akban next in line to take Zulu's rulership. We have Diego Garza. He is from that Garza family from the first and second book. Also Baron's Old Connect and human trafficking affiliate. You have Hara, who is Zulu's wife. Mikey or Michael, who runs a block in LA. You have Jacob Marez, who is Michael's connect. And of course, Anari and Vaughn. They are from the Cartel series. So if you're familiar with other books by Ashley and Jaquavis, you would have already met Anari and Vaughn. Anari is a big time dope dealer and Vaughn is her husband. So this book starts off by going back in time when Liberty and Dahlia were living in a village, and jealousy of Liberty was starting to take effect in Dahlia. Dahlia had convinced Liberty to a game of hide and seek in the middle of the night in the jungle. It seemed like because Dahlia knew the jungle inside and out and Liberty didn't. She wanted Liberty to either be eaten by the animals or to sink in some quicksand. Dahlia had become jealous of Liberty because others in the village began to praise her beauty and treat her differently than the other children. Even Dahlia's mother began to show favoritism. Either way, before Liberty stepped in the quicksand, Dahlia came to her rescue. Wasn't shot during the shootout that Lil Mikey initiated. Somehow, by Liberty folding up on the floorboard, she was unharmed. Lil Mikey did come over and pull her out of the vehicle by her throat to ask her where was Rocco. Of course she didn't know, and eventually Lil Mikey fled the scene. Liberty grabbed her duffel bag and caught a cab. There she was able to flee the scene before the cops showed up, as well as put 2 and 2 together. She figured Poe had ordered Lil Mikey to take out Rocco, all under Dahlia's influence. Liberty decided then to try to get through to Poe before it was too late. Dahlia and Poe did get on the rented yacht, headed to Mexico for a mini vacation. The whole time, Dahlia had been planning to become king, and Poe was the last person standing in her way. She planted a bag of cocaine on the yacht and made an anonymous tip to the Coast Guard before they left. So eventually the Coast Guard pulled them over. Poe figured he didn't have anything to worry about because he wasn't dealing drugs anymore and was certain none were on the boat. So he let the Coast Guard search it. Mid-search, he saw a weird look on Dahlia's face and knew that she was behind the entire plot. The guards did find the uncut cocaine in Dahlia's duffel bag and were about to take him to prison. However, Poe adjusted his crown and made the Coast Guard an offer they couldn't refuse. As soon as the guards went on their way, he let Dahlia have it and threw in her face that Liberty held her position better than what Dahlia was doing, which only made Dahlia furious on the inside. Poe decided there wasn't going to be a vacation and decided to head back to LA while Dahlia began planning Plan B. Zulu and his men had already put a bullet in Rocco's knee and were asking him where was Dahlia and Poe. Of course, Rocco didn't know because he hadn't heard from Poe. However, Zulu didn't believe Rocco. He couldn't understand how someone's right hand didn't know where he was and at the same time be loyal enough to die with the secret. Just before Zulu's army was about to kill Rocco, Liberty walked in and practically saved her and Rocco's life. She made a deal with Zulu to deliver Dahlia to him if he spared Poe. She explained to Zulu that her blood cousin had betrayed her and to deliver her to Zulu would be sweet revenge. Zulu allowed Liberty and Rocco to leave and gave them 48 hours to hand over Dahlia. Rocco and Liberty hopped in Rocco's car. His injury was bleeding out and Rocco was going in and out of consciousness. He told Liberty that his address was in the GPS and that he had a personal doctor on call that made house visits for him. Once they arrived at Rocco's suburban home, the doctor showed up, did the surgery to remove the bullet, and gave Rocco some drugs for the pain. After the doctor left, sparks began to form between Liberty and Rocco, and they both were confused and intrigued at the same time. They shook the feelings off and pretended as if it was fear stemming from them putting themselves on the line earlier that day for Poe. Liberty retreated on the top floor, leaving Rocco on the couch downstairs. Meanwhile, after coming back to shore and retrieving his car, Poe charged on his phone and noticed he had missed calls from Lil Mikey. Lil Mikey had told him that he almost shot Liberty because Liberty was in Rocco's truck. Poe ended up dropping Dahlia off at the mansion without even going inside, and then he headed straight to Rocco's house. Dahlia was caught off guard by the blood trail outside of the home, and then when she finally worked up the nerve to go inside, she saw the massive amount of blood everywhere and thought someone was inside waiting to kill her. After she retrieved her gun, she searched all of the rooms of the mansion. No one was there, apparently, but it left her wondering, was someone after her or were they after Poe? She called Poe but got no answer. Poe made it to Rocco's house only for Liberty to answer the door wearing Rocco's shirt in the middle of the night. Liberty and Poe connected for a minute, then the thought of Rocco sleeping with Liberty took over his mind, as well as the cocaine. He went charging for Rocco, and Liberty tried to explain that it wasn't what he thought, but Poe pulled away from Liberty and threw her because he was enraged. Eventually, the men sat down, and Rocco was able to get Poe to see that Dahlia was playing him for a fool. And then Liberty told him about the things she had uncovered about Dahlia. The doctors had called her and told her Plan B was found in her system, and she knew that Dahlia was the one putting them into her food and drink somehow to make her miscarry. Poe was livid, but after finding out that Liberty had laid her life on the line to keep Zulu off of him, he wanted to make sure that he could help Liberty deliver Dahlia. So he had to spend this one last night with her. Liberty was skeptical and felt like Poe was going to be entrapped by Dahlia again, and that she would lose him to Dahlia once again. Poe made it back to the mansion to find Dahlia sitting in the dark. Of course, she used sex to try to bring his guard down, which unfortunately didn't work in her favor this time. I guess they made it through the night because Poe gave Rocco the go-ahead on Liberty putting in the call to Zulu. When Rocco came upstairs to tell Liberty, they ended up kissing and eventually brushed off any chances that they could have had to be together. However, Rocco was intoxicated by Liberty. Anyway, Rocco told Liberty to stay behind while he and Poe handled the situation. Liberty refused to stay behind, so she hopped in the shower to get ready. But once she was in there, Rocco got her phone to get Zulu's address and then grabbed his keys and left Liberty in the shower. Poe had told Dahlia he wanted her to ride with him today. They were both getting dressed and hadn't talked much, and she noticed that Poe put 2 guns in his holster and pointed out the fact to him as she questioned him about it. He pretty much just told her he wanted to have them versus not have them. They eventually left, but once inside the car, Dahlia began to replay the unusual way Poe had been acting since they got off the yacht. Halfway to their destination, she ended up pulling her gun on Poe and asked him where was he taking her. He lied like they were going to meet someone about diamonds. Then she asked for his phone, only to find that he was back in cahoots with Rocco, which meant he was back together with Liberty. Next, she got a call from Liberty, where Liberty threatened to take the surveillance camera to the police of Dahlia killing Trixie if she didn't deliver Poe in one piece. So out of fear, Dahlia put Poe in the trunk and drove to the address Liberty had given her. Once she let Poe out of the trunk, he ended up knocking Dahlia and her gun to the ground and snatched the gun up and pushed her into the house where Zulu and his mafia was. 2 of Zulu's men snatched her up and as Liberty watched. Then Liberty slapped the taste out of her mouth before her and Poe left the house. Upon leaving, they ran into Rocco, who had been sitting at the meeting spot until his instincts told him that something was off. Either way, the 3 of them left Dahlia to Zulu and his men in Rocco's suburban home. He was just about to take Dahlia's life as she begged and pleaded. He asked his right hand Salim for the weapon of choice, which was his machete. Then suddenly Dahlia belted out that she was Zulu's daughter. It caught Zulu off guard because he was never able to have children with his current wife, but he had been promiscuous back in his younger days. After Dahlia mentioned her mom's name, Zulu remembered encounters with her. Zulu asked Dahlia to tell him how her mother told her about him, and she did, reliving the details of her mother's lifestyle of prostituting. Once she was done telling the story, Zulu was so caught up in it and happy to finally be a father, he didn't notice that Dahlia had grabbed the machete until she had sliced and diced him with it. He screamed out, "I'm your father." And Dahlia replied, "No, you're not. I'm just a good storyteller." She remembered her mother bragging that Zulu was a client, and she just used the information to her advantage. Once Dahlia walked out of the house to face Zulu's goons, she spoke with Salim, and she pretty much told him that Zulu was dead and that they could join her. However, Salim had to school her on the fact that there were rules to this. She had to be accepted by the 5 families first, and the next person in line was actually Ali Akban, who Dahlia thought was dead. Salim told her that if Ali made it to the 5 family before she did, then they would give the crown to him because they know him. He also reminded Dahlia that she was a woman. She broke all the rules and she exemplifies everything that a woman should not be. However, she was up for the challenge and wanted to send Ali to the same place she had just sent Zulu. Dahlia also made a mental note to come back for Poe and Liberty. Poe, Rocco, and Liberty head out for Detroit. It was a silent trip filled with betrayal, pain, tension, distrust, and resentment. It wasn't until they pulled over at a service station and Poe went inside that Rocco and Liberty actually spoke. She didn't want Rocco to be mad at her for forgiving Poe. Rocco felt like Poe didn't deserve Liberty, but it was nothing he could do. Rocco also mentioned to Liberty that he could no longer trust Poe, so he was going to go on his own and do his own thing. He could never trust someone who tried to kill him. Liberty explained to Rocco that they all needed one another and that they needed to leave the past in the past. Rocco agreed for now out of loyalty for Liberty. They ended up going to Liberty's and Ashai's home to chill until everyone got back on their feet. Liberty wanted to take things extremely slow with Poe. Walking to her home alone before the men came in, she wanted to walk around since she hadn't been back since Ashai's death. Everything about the house brought back memories of her and Ashai. She also noticed a pile of letters that had been put in the mail chute. They were addressed to her but had no return address. After walking around the house for a bit, she heard someone coming from the back and laid eyes on someone she hadn't seen in years. He came back to Detroit after a few years just to visit his son's grave. He couldn't attend the funeral because of his America's Most Wanted status, so he just laid low until now. And now he needed to know why his only son took his own life, and he figured Liberty was the only person who could tell him. Barron had a lot of regrets and blamed himself for how his life turned out and for the downfall of his family. Barron reminisced about how Lashay became a part of their family 15 years ago. Barron decided to go to the home that Lashay had purchased and remembered that Lashay had a bad habit of losing his keys, so he always kept a spare underneath the mat at the back door, and that's exactly where he found the key. Barron entered the home and looked around a moment before running into Liberty. They embraced one another and had small talk before she sent him to light the furnace in the basement. While he was down there, Poe and Rocco came to the door. She had forgot she left them out there in the car. Soon thereafter, Poe and Rocco saw Barron entering the living room. Liberty had to intervene because the men didn't know Barron was in the house. Liberty introduced them. Poe already knew who Barron was because he grew up idolizing him. Rocco, on the other hand, didn't like how Barron had disrespected Poe. Either way, Poe and Rocco decided to get a hotel room and left Barron and Liberty to talk. They talked about everything, even about Dahlia's betrayal. Barron felt like Liberty was the closest thing to family he had left, and he felt obligated to help her. Dahlia flew back to Africa and was driven by Zulu's men to his kingdom in the middle of the night. She ordered his men to kill everyone inside the home except for Zulu's wife. She needed Zulu's wife to lead her to Ali Akbar because she knew of their old love affair and knew that he would come back for Hara. Hara is Zulu's wife. Once the soldiers found Hara, they dragged her to Dahlia's feet. Dahlia played Russian roulette with her to get her to comply. Eventually, Hara gave in and made a bet with Dahlia. Later, the funeral was held for Zulu, and Dahlia had been watching Hara's every move. So after the funeral, everyone met at a local church to eat. Ali was there disguised as a waiter and ended up pulling Hara into a closet to talk. They eventually decided to meet somewhere else and snuck off to a hotel. There, Hara told Ali about Dahlia and her plan to take him out. Ali assured her that he wasn't going to let anything happen to her and that she didn't have to worry. He told Hara to stay at the hotel while he went to handle things as well as talk to the 5 families. So he left Hara there. Around 4:30 in the morning, he called her to tell her to meet him so they could run away. Once she made it to the location, that's when Hara learned of Ali's betrayal. He had went out and found Dahlia to cut a deal with her and lure Hara to the meeting spot to meet her death. After they killed Hara, they murked Ali as well for his betrayal. Salim ended up taking Dahlia to meet the 5 families. They were all elderly gentlemen, and only one of them spoke on behalf of the 5 families. At first, Dahlia was dismissed and unwelcome, but after she proved to them that she had taken out both Zulu and Ali, they gave her their blessing. Later, she went back to the States to make her presence known, felt, and heard. She wanted the drug dealers to sell her product or pay taxes for selling on her streets. She made examples out of some of the drug dealers from LA, but had a problem with one dude by the name of Mikey, who she ordered to reach out to her, but he didn't. So she killed people in his trap houses and threw money from his safe onto the streets. This was all done to get Mikey's attention and to get him to come find her. Dahlia felt like she was on top of the world since, using Mikey as an example, she had the streets on lock. They were either paying tithes to the African Mafia or selling the African Mafia's product. Dahlia wanted to be a legend. She was also gifted a home in Beverly Hills from the 5 families, and it was dark and lonely. Dahlia claimed she was married to money and power and had no room for love. Anyway, Dahlia received an unexpected box at her home. Once she opened it, she found her right hand's head in it, which was Salim, and his body chopped into pieces. There was also a note for her to meet with someone at the Beverly Hills Shire Hotel at 9 p.m. She assumed that she would be meeting with Mikey, but ended up actually meeting with the Canet, who is Jacob Mares, who was actually trying to persuade her to to be his business partner. He wanted to connect Dahlia to the human trafficking and sex world. She eventually took him up on his offer and ended up agreeing to accompany him to the gentleman's ball. On Rocco were in their hotel room, both lost in their own thoughts. Even though their friendship was not the same, they still had love for one another. Poe was busy thinking about and missing Dahlia, and Rocco couldn't get his mind off of Liberty. Finally, Rocco asked Poe about Baron and suggested that Liberty get him to plug them to a new connect. Poe called Liberty and explained everything, and Liberty said she would try. Back at Liberty's house, she asked Baron about plugging Poe and Rocco to some new connects. At first, he was hesitant, but then he put Liberty up on game and let her know that she could be their connect, and let her know that she had to make them need her. He told her, "You can't depend on loyalty, only on greed." So he told Liberty he could take her to the gentleman's ball to get connected, and then he would be out. Of course, at first Liberty was hesitant, but after Baron convinced her to face her fears, she decided to go. And Liberty flew out to California for the gentleman's ball. Baron cleaned himself up and walked into the ball with Liberty on his arm. The first people that they bumped into was Anari and her husband Vaughn. Baron introduced Liberty as his daughter, and Anari was in awe of Liberty's beauty, and at the same time Liberty was intrigued by Anari's confidence and power. Liberty looked around the place and was instantly taken back to when she was auctioned off there. Eventually Baron told her to find them a table. He went to mingle with his old colleagues. Soon thereafter, the crowd of people were gravitating towards Baron. Dahlia and Jacob arrived during this gathering, and Dahlia was intrigued and asked Jacob more about Baron. He told her briefly about Baron, and then Dahlia began making her way towards him. She loved a man in power and was ready to seduce him. When Baron laid eyes on her, he was intoxicated by her exotic beauty and voluptuous frame, and ended up following her to the ladies' restroom. There Dahlia tried to seduce him, but it didn't quite work in her favor. He left her in there. Liberty had spotted Abia and wanted to go and speak with her, so she made her way behind the stage and they got reacquainted. Abia was happy to see that Liberty was out of the business and finally happy. Once Liberty was heading back to her table, she spotted Baron. He waved for her, and then she saw Dahlia sitting a couple tables back with some other gentlemen. She hurriedly asked the waitress for the mask she was wearing, and then she went and told Baron that Dahlia was there, not knowing that Baron had just had an encounter with her in the ladies' restroom. Baron asked Liberty did she want Dahlia handled, and Liberty said yes. Then he told her the best way to handle a problem is to go ahead and deal with it, and he and Liberty then began devising a plan. Dahlia kept an eye on Baron as she asked Jacob more about him. She also felt offended that Baron was paying more attention to the help instead of her. Eventually, Baron got up and headed towards the bathroom, and as he passed Dahlia, he winked at her, so she got up, grabbed a glass of champagne from the closest waitress, and followed Baron back into the women's bathroom. This time he let Dahlia pleasure him until she started feeling dizzy and ended up laid out on the floor. Baron exited as Liberty walked in, retrieving a gun from him. She stood over Dahlia, but of course Liberty couldn't murk her. However, she told her that she would let Karma catch up to her. Baron ended up taking Liberty to the airport. He had connected her to everybody he was affiliated with. Now he was going to go back and finish Dahlia because he knew that Liberty wasn't able to do it. Dahlia made her way out of the back of the hotel. She saw a car pull up and assumed it was a car Jacob had gotten, so she hopped in only to find out she was being kidnapped. And was hightailing it back to handle Dahlia and was in an accident involving 2 or 3 other black SUVs. Ultimately, he was kidnapped as well. Corner, Liberty arrived back in Detroit. She called and asked Rocco to pick her up. She confessed her love for him and told him she wanted to be with him. Rocco dismissed her, even though inside he loved her. He made Liberty cry, and when he dropped her off, he couldn't leave. He felt bad for making her cry, so he went up to her door, and when she answered, he confessed his true feelings. They embraced and kissed, and Poe walked up on them. Poe and Rocco fought until they decided to let Liberty choose. Of course, Liberty chose Rocco, and she reminded Poe that he had left her and chose her cousin. No one stole her from him. He basically threw her away. So Poe bowed out but told Rocco to take care of her heart. Baron Anari, Dahlia, and others were actually kidnapped by the Illuminati to push this new drug. Dahlia decided she didn't want to be a part of this new operation, so the Illuminati ended up wiping her off the map. Had passed, and Liberty and Rocco were now expecting a baby and were happy. They never heard from Poe again. One day while Liberty was 8 months pregnant and visiting Lashay's grave, she started to have unusual pains. Rocco rushed her to the hospital to find out she was already dilated. However, the baby's heartbeat was really low, so they had to do an emergency cesarean. Either way, King was welcome into the world, and Liberty realized in that moment why she had endured so much in life. And it was for this very moment. She went through so much so that her child didn't have to. She could protect him from all the things she had experienced. Rocco and Liberty both also realized what pure love felt like in that moment. That's pretty much it for this series, this book. So now I'm just going to go into my thoughts and opinions, and I do have them written down. So I just can't believe the lengths Dahlia went through to get to the position of power. She actually tried to get Poe sent to prison by setting him up. I'm glad Poe adjusted his crown and handled that situation. However, I am confused about why he kept her behind that whole situation. He didn't even consider breaking up with her. He just let her wiggle her way out of it. So I really don't understand, if somebody was trying to get you locked up and she's supposed to be your girl and the evidence is right there, that was her duffel bag, her drugs. You don't even deal with drugs anymore, and they were trying to arrest you. Why would you still want to be with that person? And he knew that it was her. So anyway, he didn't even try to break up with her. Like how Poe just flew off the handle without giving people the opportunity to state their case. He just believed whatever Dahlia said and ran with it. He never gave a person a chance to defend themselves. It's like every situation where she told him to kill somebody or take somebody out or somebody that she didn't trust, he never questioned them. He never heard their side. He just took her word for it. And I thought, businessmen will operate a little bit differently, especially if someone on a level of success like that, and the people that you're dealing with, you've been dealing with forever. So why would you take this newcomer that you don't know that much about, and you see that she isn't the best the best type of person to trust, because you met her through her husband, who she eventually killed to be with you. So that lets you know she's a very disloyal person, untrustworthy person, and you still just want to take her word and run with it without even questioning the people that you've been around for years and years and years. I didn't get that. Anyway, I didn't like how vulnerable Poe always left Liberty. He always said he wasn't going to let anything happen to her, but every time we turned around, her cars were being shot up. When she came from Africa, he was trying to get her driven to the new estate that he had purchased. On the way there, the car was shot up. Next, she was in Rocco's truck, her vehicle was shot up. I mean, she's been shot at a few times dealing with Poe when he's saying that he was going to protect her. So there's a few things about Poe where I see where she chose Rocco over Poe. You know what I'm saying? I was shocked that a romance transpired with Liberty and Rocco. I wasn't expecting that, but I still don't believe that Poe and Liberty would have worked. He slept with family, chose family over her, and kicked her out for family. I don't think that kind of betrayal is easy to get over. Then he tried to kill his best friend since childhood. That type of betrayal you don't get over. Somebody trying to kill you. Ultimately, Poe was not a good person, and he crossed both Liberty and Poe first. So he was the one doing this these unusual acts against people that are supposed to be his friends. He's the one who crossed that line first. So I don't know about Liberty and Rocco trying to get together, but to see Baron finally accepting Liberty, I wish he could have accepted her sooner, because his wife and son might have still been alive. See, this all stemmed from him not wanting to help Lashay when he bought this girl from the auction. You know what I'm saying? He didn't know much about Liberty then, but he was not accepting of her. He didn't even want to get to know her or anything like that. And now that everybody's dead, now you see her for who she is, and you like, this the only family I got left. She's the closest thing to me. But this relationship could have been built a long time ago. You know what I'm saying? And come to find out, her background is the same as your wife's background. So it's a little too late, Baron. One is, I thought it was crazy that the African mafia was always watching Dahlia's back, but they didn't see Saline being killed, nor did they see her getting this SUV with these white men during the kidnapping, nor were they around when she got beat and murdered in the Vatican. That African mafia must have been turning the other cheek a couple of times, or they went to sleep and they ain't see nothing. So it was like they was picking and choosing when they wanted to be watching her all the time. Because she said they never, let her out of their sight. But how did all this other stuff go on if the mafia was always around watching? So obviously they was turning the other cheek, or they was asleep. Next one is, I don't really know how I feel about Rocco and Liberty hooking up. It seems wrong, but I know that Poe really couldn't commit to her, and he was still thinking about Dahlia after all the scandalous stuff she did. Either way, Liberty and Rocco were brought together under crazy circumstances with a mutual friend who betrayed them both. It's like, do you throw stone for stone, meaning betray him back and then expect to win? Or, do you just fight your feelings that you develop for this new person? I don't know. I'm just confused about that. I don't know. I feel like friends should be off limit, but this person did betray you. So are they still technically a friend? I don't know. Y'all let me know in the comments. About the book, I did enjoy this series by Ashley and Jaquavis. This book has some very scandalous situations. Either way, it was still a good read. So yeah, let me know your thoughts and opinions below in the comment section, and any suggestions that you may have. I have a book list that I'm trying to make it down. Some of the books are really expensive, so it's going to take me a while to get them, but I am taking everyone's suggestions into consideration. Also, our next series will be it's supposed to be a romantic series. I wanted to change it up a little bit. So it's called Love and Hennessey, an addictive kind of love. And it's a series of 3 books. And it is by Carmen Lashay. You can actually order the series off of Amazon if you want to read along with me. So yeah, we'll be starting that immediately. Thank you all for joining me in the reading room today. I really appreciate your time and energy. I look forward to seeing you all on the next book review. Peace and love, and as always,
DJ C on the track.
Cause that be natural.
Lady D.
Ain't looking tacky. I keep my game tactful.
Yo,
yeah, I'm so nappy. Cause that be natural.
The infamous.
Ain't looking tacky. Cause I keep my game tactful.
I'm so pretty, I'm so fat, boo, I'm so natural. It's like